Welcome back to the Seven Dials Mystery by Agatha Christie. The plot is thickening, the stakes are rising, and secrets are beginning to unravel. So far, we've followed Bundle Brent through a maze of lies, hidden identities, and a shadowy organization pulling strings in the background. But the final pieces of the puzzle are drawing closer. In this part, revelations come to light and the truth begins to surface. Are you ready to discover what's really been going on behind the scenes? Let's continue the mystery. Our chronicle must here split into three separate and distinct portions. The night was to prove an eventful one, and each of the three persons involved saw it from his or her own individual angle. We will begin with that pleasant and engaging youth, Mr. Jimmy Thesiger, at a moment when he has at last exchanged final good nights with his fellow conspirator, Bill Eversley. "Don't forget," said Bill, 3A, "if you're still alive, that is," he added kindly. "I may be an ass," said Jimmy, with rancorous remembrance of the remark Bundle had repeated to him, "but I'm not nearly so much of an ass as I look." "That's what you said about Jerry Wade," said Bill slowly. "Do you remember? And that very night he—" "Shut up, you damned fool," said Jimmy. "Haven't you got any tact?" "Of course I've got tact," said Bill. "I'm a budding diplomatist. All diplomatists have tact." "Ah," said Jimmy, "you must be still in what they call the larval stage." "I can't get over Bundle," said Bill, reverting abruptly to a former topic. "I should certainly have said that she'd be, well, difficult. Bundle's improved. She's improved very much." "That's what your chief was saying," said Jimmy. "He said he was agreeably surprised." "I thought Bundle was laying it on a bit thick myself," said Bill. "But Cotters is such an ass he'd swallow anything." "Well, night-night. I expect you'll have a bit of a job waking me when the times comes, but stick to it. It won't be much good if you've taken a leaf out of Jerry Wade's book," said Jimmy maliciously. Bill looked at him reproachfully. "What the hell do you want to go and make a chap uncomfortable for?" he demanded. "You're only getting your own back," said Jimmy. "Toddle along." But Bill lingered. He stood uncomfortably, first on one foot and then on the other. "Look here," he said. "Yes. What I mean to say is, well, I mean you'll be all right and all that, won't you? It's all very well ragging, but when I think of poor old Jerry and then poor old Ronnie—" Jimmy gazed at him in exasperation. Bill was one of those who undoubtedly meant well, but the result of his efforts would not be described as heartening. "I see," he remarked, "that I shall have to show you Leopold." He slipped his hand into the pocket of the dark blue suit into which he had just changed and held out something for Bill's inspection. "A real, genuine, blue-nosed automatic," he said with modest pride. "No, I say," said Bill, "is it really?" He was undoubtedly impressed. "Stevens, my man, got him for me. Warranted clean and methodical in his habits. You press the button and Leopold does the rest." "Oh," said Bill. "I say, Jimmy." "Yes." "Be careful, won't you? I mean, don't go loosing that thing off at anybody. Pretty awkward if you shot old Digby walking in his sleep." "That's all right," said Jimmy. "Naturally, I want to get value out of Leopold now I've bought him, but I'll curb my bloodthirsty instincts as far as possible." "Well, night-night," said Bill for the 14th time, and this time really did depart. Jimmy was left alone to take up his vigil. Sir Stanley Digby occupied a room at the extremity of the west wing. A bathroom adjoined it on one side, and on the other a communicating door led into a smaller room, which was tenanted by Mr. Terence O'Rourke. The doors of these three rooms gave on to a short corridor. The watcher had a simple task. A chair placed inconspicuously in the shadow of an oak press, just where the corridor ran into the main gallery, formed a perfect vantage ground. There was no other way into the west wing, and anyone going to or from it could not fail to be seen. One electric light was still on. Jimmy ensconced himself comfortably, crossed his legs, and waited. Leopold lay in readiness across his knee. He glanced at his watch. It was 20 minutes to 1. Just an hour since the household had retired to rest. Not a sound broke the stillness, except for the far-off ticking of a clock somewhere. Somehow or other, Jimmy did not much care for that sound. It recalled things, Gerald Wade, and those 7 ticking clocks on the mantelpiece. Whose hand had placed them there and why? He shivered. It was a creepy business, this waiting. He didn't wonder that things happened at spiritualistic seances. Sitting in the gloom, one got all worked up, ready to start at the least sound, and unpleasant thoughts came crowding in on a fellow. Ronnie Devereux and Jerry Wade, both young, both full of life and energy, ordinary, jolly, healthy young men. And now where were they? Dank earth worms getting them. Ugh, Why couldn't he put these horrible thoughts out of his mind? He looked again at his watch. 20 minutes past 1 only. How the time crawled. Extraordinary girl, Bundle. Fancy having the nerve and the daring actually to get into the midst of that Seven Dials place. Why hadn't he the nerve and initiative to think of that? He supposed because the thing was so fantastic. Who the hell could know? 7B? Was he, perhaps, in the house at this minute? Disguised as a servant. He couldn't, surely, be one of the guests. No, that was impossible. But then, the whole thing was impossible. If he hadn't believed Bundle to be essentially truthful, well, he would have thought she had invented the whole thing. He yawned. Queer to feel sleepy, and yet at the same time strung up. He looked again at his watch. 10 minutes to 2. Time was getting on, and then, suddenly, he held his breath and leaned forward, listening. He had heard something. The minutes went past. There was again the creak of a board, but it came from downstairs somewhere. There was again a slight, ominous creak. Somebody was moving stealthily about the house. Jimmy sprang noiselessly to his feet. He crept silently to the head of the staircase. Everything seemed perfectly quiet, yet he was quite certain he had really heard that stealthy sound. It was not imagination. Very quietly and cautiously he crept down the staircase, Leopold clasped tightly in his right hand. Not a sound in the big hall. If he had been correct in assuming that the muffled sound came from directly beneath him, then it must have come from the library. Jimmy stole to the door of it, listened, but heard nothing. Then, suddenly flinging open the door, he switched on the lights. Nothing. The big room was flooded with light, but it was empty. Jimmy frowned. I could have sworn, he murmured to himself. The library was a large room with 3 windows which opened onto the terrace. Jimmy strode across the room. The middle window was unlatched. He opened it and stepped out onto the terrace, looking from end to end of it. Nothing. Looks all right, he murmured to himself. And yet, he remained for a minute lost in thought. Then he stepped back into the library. Crossing to the door, he locked it and put the key in his pocket. Then he switched off the light. He stood for a minute listening, then crossed softly to the open window and stood there, Leopold ready in his hand. Was there, or was there not, a soft patter of feet along the terrace? No, his imagination. He grasped Leopold tightly and stood listening. In the distance, a stable clock chimed 2. Bundle Brent was a resourceful girl. She was also a girl of imagination. She had foreseen that Bill, if not Jimmy, would make objections to her participation in the possible dangers of the night. It was not Bundle's idea to waste time in argument. She had laid her own plans and made her own arrangements. A glance from her bedroom window shortly before dinner had been highly satisfactory. She had known that the gray walls of the Abbey were plentifully adorned with ivy, but the ivy outside her window was particularly solid-looking and would present no difficulties to one of her athletic propensities. She had no fault to find with Bill's and Jimmy's arrangements as far as they went, but in her opinion, they did not go far enough. She offered no criticism because she intended to see to that side of things herself. Briefly, while Jimmy and Bill were devoting themselves to the inside of the Abbey, Bundle intended to devote her attentions to the outside. Her own meek acquiescence in the tame role assigned to her gave her an infinity of pleasure, though she wondered scornfully how either of the 2 men could be so easily deceived. Bill, of course, had never been famous for scintillating brain power. On the other hand, he knew, or should know, his Bundle, and she considered that Jimmy Thesiger, though only slightly acquainted with her, ought to have known better than to imagine that she could be so easily and summarily disposed of. Once in the privacy of her own room, Bundle set rapidly to work. First she discarded her evening dress and the negligible trifle which she wore beneath it, and started again, so to speak, from the foundations. Bundle had not brought her maid with her, and she had packed herself. Otherwise, the puzzled Frenchwoman might have wondered why her lady took a pair of riding breeches and no further equine equipment. Arrayed in riding breeches, rubber-soled shoes, and a dark-colored pullover, Bundle was ready for the fray. She glanced at the time. As yet, it was only 12:30. Too early by far. Whatever was going to happen would not happen for some time yet. The occupants of the house must all be given time to get off to sleep. 1:30 was the time fixed by Bundle for the start of operations. She switched off her light and sat down by the window to wait. Punctually at the appointed moment, she rose, pushed up the sash, and swung her leg over the sill. The night was a fine one, cold and still. There was starlight, but no moon. She found the descent very easy. Bundle and her two sisters had run wild in the park at Chimneys as small children, and they could all climb like cats. Bundle arrived on a flower bed, rather breathless but quite unscathed. She paused a minute to take stock of her plans. She knew that the rooms occupied by the Air Minister and his secretary were in the West Wing. That was the opposite side of the house from where Bundle was now standing. A terrace ran along the south and west side of the house, ending abruptly against a walled fruit garden. Bundle stepped out of her flower bed and turned the corner of the house to where the terrace began on the south side. She crept very quietly along it, keeping close to the shadow of the house. But as she reached the second corner, she got a shock, for a man was standing there, with the clear intention of barring her way. The next instant she had recognized him. "Superintendent Battle, you did give me a fright." "That's what I'm here for," said the superintendent pleasantly. Bundle looked at him. It struck her now, as so often before, how remarkably little camouflage there was about him. He was large and solid and noticeable. He was somehow very English. But of one thing Bundle was quite sure. Superintendent Battle was no fool. "What are you really doing here?" she asked, still in a whisper. "Just seeing," said Battle, "that nobody's about who shouldn't be." "Oh," said Bundle, rather taken aback. "You, for instance, Lady Eileen. I don't suppose you usually take a walk at this time of night." "Do you mean," said Bundle slowly, "that you want me to go back?" Superintendent Battle nodded approvingly. "You're very quick, Lady Eileen. That's just what I do mean. Did you, come out of a door or the window?" "The window. It's easy as anything climbing down this ivy." Superintendent Battle looked up at it thoughtfully. "Yes," he said, "I should say it would be." "And you want me to go back?" said Bundle. "I'm rather sick about that. I want to go round on to the West Terrace." "Perhaps you won't be the only one who'll want to do that," said Battle. "Nobody could miss seeing you," said Bundle rather spitefully. The superintendent seemed rather pleased than otherwise. "I hope they won't," he said. "No unpleasantness. That's my motto. And if you'll excuse me, Lady Eileen, I think it's time you were going back to bed." The firmness of his tone admitted of no parley. Rather crestfallen, Bundle retraced her steps. She was halfway up the ivy when a sudden idea occurred to her, and she nearly relaxed her grip and fell. Supposing Superintendent Battle suspected her. There had been something, yes, surely there had been something in his manner that vaguely suggested the idea. She couldn't help laughing as she crawled over the sill into her bedroom. Fancy the solid superintendent suspecting her. Though she had so far obeyed Battle's orders as to return to her room, Bundle had no intention of going to bed and sleeping, nor did she think that Battle had really intended her to do so. He was not a man to expect impossibilities, and to remain quiescent when something daring and exciting might be going on was a sheer impossibility to Bundle. She glanced at her watch. It was 10 minutes to 2. After a moment or two of irresolution, she cautiously opened her door. Not a sound. Everything was still and peaceful. She stole cautiously along the passage. Once she halted, thinking she heard a board creak somewhere, but then convinced that she was mistaken, she went on again. She was now in the main corridor, making her way to the West Wing. She reached the angle of intersection and peered cautiously round. Then she stared in blank surprise. The watcher's post was empty. Jimmy Thesiger was not there. Bundle stared in complete amazement. What had happened? Why had Jimmy left his post? What did it mean? And at that moment, she heard a clock strike 2. She was still standing there, debating what to do next, when suddenly her heart gave a leap and then seemed to stand still. The door handle of Terence O'Rourke's room was slowly turning. Bundle watched, fascinated, but the door did not open. Instead, the knob returned slowly to its original position. What did it mean? Suddenly, Bundle came to a resolution. Jimmy, for some unknown reason, had deserted his post. She must get hold of Bill. Quickly and noiselessly, Bundle fled along the way she had come. She burst unceremoniously into Bill's room. "Bill, wake up. Oh, do wake up." It was an urgent whisper she sent forth, but there came no response to it. "Bill," breathed Bundle. Impatiently she switched on the lights, and then stood dumbfounded. The room was empty, and the bed had not even been slept in. Where then was Bill? Suddenly she caught her breath. This was not Bill's room. The dainty negligee thrown over a chair, the feminine knickknacks on the dressing table, the black velvet evening dress thrown carelessly over a chair. Of course, in her haste she had mistaken the doors. This was the Countess Radsky's room. But where? Oh, where was the Countess? And just as Bundle was asking herself this question, the silence of the night was suddenly broken, and in no uncertain manner. The clamor came from below. In an instant, Bundle had sped out of the Countess's room and downstairs. The sounds came from the library, a violent crashing of chairs being overturned. Bundle rattled vainly at the library door. It was locked, but she could clearly hear the struggle that was going on within. The panting and scuffing, curses in manly tones, the occasional crash as some light piece of furniture came into the line of battle. And then, sinister and distinct, breaking the peace of the night for good and all, 2 shots in rapid succession. Lorraine Wade sat up in bed and switched on the light. It was exactly 10 minutes to 1. She had gone to bed early, at 9:30. She possessed the useful art of being able to wake herself up at the required time, so she had been able to enjoy some hours of refreshing sleep. 2 dogs slept in the room with her, and one of these now raised his head and looked at her inquiringly. "Quiet, Lurcher," said Lorraine, and the big animal put his head down again obediently, watching her from between his shaggy eyelashes. It is true that Bundle had once doubted the meekness of Lorraine Wade, but that brief moment of suspicion had passed. Lorraine had seemed so entirely reasonable, so willing to be kept out of everything. And yet, if you studied the girl's face, you saw that there was strength of purpose in the small, resolute jaw and the lips that closed together so firmly. Lorraine rose and dressed herself in a tweed coat and skirt. Into one pocket of the coat, she dropped an electric torch. Then she opened the drawer of her dressing table and took out a small ivory-handled pistol, almost a toy in appearance. She had bought it the day before at Harrod's, and she was very pleased with it. She gave a final glance round the room to see if she had forgotten anything, and at that moment the big dog rose and came over to her, looking up at her with pleading eyes and wagging his tail. Lorraine shook her head. "No, Lurcher, can't go. Mrs. can't take you. Gotta stay here and be a good boy." She dropped a kiss on the dog's head, made him lie down on his rug again, and then slipped noiselessly out of the room, closing the door behind her. She let herself out of the house by a side door and made her way round to the garage, where her little 2-seater car was in readiness. There was a gentle slope, and she let the car run silently down it, not starting the engine till she was some way from the house. Then she glanced at the watch on her arm and pressed her foot down on the accelerator. She left the car at a spot she had previously marked down. There was a gap there in the fencing that she could easily get through. A few minutes later, slightly muddy, Lorraine stood inside the grounds of Wyvern Abbey. As noiselessly as possible, she made her way towards the venerable, ivy-covered building. In the distance, a stable clock chimed 2. Lorraine's heart beat faster as she drew near to the terrace. There was no one about, no sign of life anywhere. Everything seemed peaceful and undisturbed. She reached the terrace and stood there, looking about her. Suddenly, without the least warning, something from above fell with a flop almost at her feet. Lorraine stooped to pick it up. It was a brown paper packet, loosely wrapped. Holding it, Lorraine looked up. There was an open window just above her head, and even as she looked, a leg swung over it, and a man began to climb down the ivy. Lorraine waited for no more. She took to her heels and ran, still clasping the brown paper packet. Behind her, the noise of a struggle suddenly broke out. A hoarse voice. "Let me go." Another that she knew well. "Not if I know it." "Ah, you would you?" Still Lorraine ran, blindly, as though panic-stricken, right round the corner of the terrace, and slap into the arms of a large, solidly built man. There, said Superintendent Battle kindly. Lorraine was struggling to speak. Oh, quick! Oh, quick! They're killing each other. Oh, do be quick!" There was a sharp crack of a revolver shot, and then another. Superintendent Battle started to run. Lorraine followed, back round the corner of the terrace and along to the library window. The window was open. Battle stooped and switched on an electric torch. Lorraine was close beside him, peering over his shoulder. She gave a little sobbing gasp. On the threshold of the window lay Jimmy Thesiger in what looked like a pool of blood. His right arm lay dangling in a curious position. Lorraine gave a sharp cry. "He's dead," she wailed. "Oh, Jimmy, he's dead." Now, said Superintendent Battle soothingly. "Don't you take on so. The young gentleman isn't dead, I'll be bound. See if you can find the lights and turn them on." Lorraine obeyed. She stumbled across the room, found the switch by the door, and pressed it down. The room was flooded with light. Superintendent Battle uttered a sigh of relief. It's all right. He's only shot in the right arm. He's fainted through loss of blood. Come and give me a hand with him. There was a pounding on the library door. Voices were heard, asking, expostulating, demanding. Lorraine looked doubtfully at it. Shall I? No, hurry, said Battle. We'll let them in presently. You come and give me a hand. Lorraine came obediently. The superintendent had produced a large, clean pocket handkerchief and was neatly bandaging the wounded man's arm. Lorraine helped him. He'll be all right, said the superintendent. Don't you worry. As many lives as cats, these young fellows. It wasn't the loss of blood knocked him out either. He must have caught his head a crack on the floor as he fell. Outside, the knocking on the door had become tremendous. The voice of George Lomax, furiously upraised, came loud and distinct. Who is in there? Open the door at once. Superintendent Battle sighed. I suppose we shall have to, he said. A pity. His eyes darted round, taking in the scene. An automatic lay by Jimmy's side. The superintendent picked it up gingerly, holding it very delicately, and examined it. He grunted and laid it on the table. Then he stepped across and unlocked the door. Several people almost fell into the room. Nearly everybody said something at the same minute. George Lomax, spluttering with obdurate words which refused to come with sufficient fluency, exclaimed, The meaning of this? It's you. Superintendent, what's happened? I say, what has happened? Bill Eversleigh said, My God, old Jimmy, and stared at the limp figure on the ground. Lady Coote, clad in a resplendent purple dressing gown, cried out, The poor boy, and swept past Superintendent Battle to bend over the prostrate Jimmy in a motherly fashion. Bundle said, Lorraine. Her Eberhard said, Gott im Himmel, and other words of that nature. Sir Stanley Digby said, My God, what's all this? A housemaid said, Look at the blood, and screamed with pleasurable excitement. A footman said, Lor. The butler said, with a good deal more bravery in his manner than had been noticeable a few minutes earlier, Now then, this won't do, and waved away under servants. The efficient Mr. Rupert Bateman said to George, Shall we get rid of some of these people, sir? Then they all took fresh breath. Incredible, said George Lomax. Battle, what has happened? Battle gave him a look, and George's discreet habits assumed their usual sway. Now then, he said, moving to the door, Everyone go back to bed, please. There's been a little accident, said Superintendent Battle easily. Un accident. I shall be much obliged if everyone will go back to bed. Everyone was clearly reluctant to do so. Lady Coote, please, the poor boy, said Lady Coote in a motherly fashion. She rose from a kneeling position with great reluctance, and as she did so, Jimmy stirred and sat up. Hello, he said thickly. What's the matter? He looked round him vacantly for a minute or two, and then intelligence returned to his eye. Have you got him? He demanded eagerly. Got who? The man. Climbed down the ivy. I was by the window there. Grabbed him, and we had no end of the set to one of those nasty, murderous cat burglars, said Lady Coote. Poor boy. Jimmy was looking round him. I say, I'm afraid we, have made rather a mess of things. Fellow was as strong as an ox, and we went fairly waltzing around. The condition of the room was clear proof of this statement. Everything light and breakable within a range of 12 feet that could be broken had been broken. And what happened then? But Jimmy was looking round for something. Where's Leopold? The pride of the blue-nosed automatics. Battle indicated the pistol on the table. Is this yours, Mr. Thesiger? That's right. That's little Leopold. How many shots have been fired? One shot. Jimmy looked chagrined. I'm disappointed in Leopold, he murmured. I can't have pressed the button properly, or he'd have gone on shooting. Who shot first? I did. I'm afraid, said Jimmy. You see, the man twisted himself out of my grasp suddenly. I saw him making for the window, and I closed my finger down on Leopold and let him have it. He turned in the window and fired at me, and, well, I suppose after that I took the count. He rubbed his head rather ruefully, but Sir Stanley Digby was suddenly alert. Climbing down the ivy, you said? My God, Lomax, you don't think they've got away with it? He rushed from the room. For some curious reason, nobody spoke during his absence. In a few minutes, Sir Stanley returned. His round, chubby face was white as death. My God, Battle, he said, they've got it. O'Rourke's fast asleep, drugged, I think. I can't wake him, and the papers have vanished. Der liebe Gott, said Herr Eberhard in a whisper. His face had gone chalky white. George turned a face of dignified reproach on Battle. Is this true, Battle? I left all arrangements in your hands. The rock-like quality of the superintendent showed out well. Not a muscle of his face moved. The best of us are defeated sometimes, sir, he said quietly. Then you really mean that the document is gone? But to everyone's intense surprise, Superintendent Battle shook his head. No, Mr. Lomax, it's not so bad as you think. Everything's all right, but you can't lay the credit for it at my door. You gotta thank this young lady. He indicated Lorraine, who stared at him in surprise. Battle stepped across to her and gently took the brown paper parcel, which she was still clutching mechanically. I think, Mr. Lomax, he said, that you will find what you want here. Sir Stanley Digby, quicker in action than George, snatched at the package and tore it open, investigating its contents eagerly. A sigh of relief escaped him, and he mopped his brow. Herr Eberhard fell upon the child of his brain and clasped it to his heart, whilst a torrent of German burst from him. Sir Stanley turned to Lorraine, shaking her warmly by the hand. My dear young lady, he said, we are infinitely obliged to you, I am sure. Yes, indeed, said George, though he paused in some perplexity, staring at a young lady who was a total stranger to him. Lorraine looked appealingly at Jimmy, who came to the rescue. This is Miss Wade, said Jimmy, Gerald Wade's sister. Indeed, said George, shaking her warmly by the hand. My dear Miss Wade, I must express my deep gratitude to you for what you have done. I must confess that I do not quite see. He paused delicately, and four of the persons present felt that explanations were going to be fraught with much difficulty. Superintendent Battle came to the rescue. Perhaps we'd better not go into that just now, sir, he suggested tactfully. The efficient Mr. Bateman created a further diversion. Wouldn't it be wise for someone to see to O'Rourke? Don't you think, sir, that a doctor had better be sent for? Of course, said George. Of course. Most remiss of us not to have thought of it before. He looked towards Bill. Get Dr. Cartwright on the telephone. Ask him to come. Just hint, if you can, that discretion should be observed. Bill went off on his errand. I will come up with you, Digby, said George. Something, possibly, could be done. Measures should, perhaps, be taken, whilst awaiting the arrival of the doctor. He looked rather helplessly at Rupert Bateman. Efficiency always makes itself felt. It was Pongo who was really in charge of the situation. Shall I come up with you, sir? George accepted the offer with relief. Here, he felt, was someone on whom he could lean. He experienced that sense of complete trust in Mr. Bateman's efficiency, which came to all those who encountered that excellent young man. The three men left the room together. Lady Coote, murmuring in deep, rich tones, the poor young fellow. Perhaps I could do something, hurried after them. That's a very motherly woman, observed the superintendent thoughtfully. A very motherly woman. I wonder. Three pairs of eyes looked at him inquiringly. I was wondering, said Superintendent Battle slowly, where Sir Oswald Coote may be. Oh, gasped Lorraine. Do you think he's been murdered? Battle shook his head at her reproachfully. No need for anything so melodramatic, he said. No, I rather think. He paused, his head on one side, listening, one large hand raised to enjoin silence. In another minute, they all heard what his sharper ears had been the first to notice. Footsteps coming along the terrace outside. They rang out clearly with no kind of subterfuge about them. In another minute, the window was blocked by a bulky figure which stood there regarding them, and who conveyed, in an odd way, a sense of dominating the situation. Sir Oswald, for it was he, looked slowly from one face to another. His keen eyes took in the details of the situation. Jimmy, with his roughly bandaged arm. Bundle, in her somewhat anomalous attire. Lorraine, a perfect stranger to him. His eyes came last to Superintendent Battle. He spoke sharply and crisply. What's been happening here, officer? Attempted robbery, sir. Attempted, thanks to this young lady, Miss Wade. The thieves failed to get away with it. Ah, he said again, his scrutiny ended. And now, officer, what about this? He held out a small Mauser pistol, which he carried delicately by the butt. Where did you find that, Sir Oswald? On the lawn outside. I presume it must have been thrown down by one of the thieves as he took to his heels. I've held it carefully, as I thought you might wish to examine it for fingerprints. You think of everything, Sir Oswald, said Battle. He took the pistol from the other, handling it with equal care, and laid it down on the table beside Jimmy's Colt. And now, if you please, said Sir Oswald, I should like to hear exactly what occurred. Superintendent Battle gave a brief resume of the events of the night. Sir Oswald frowned thoughtfully. "Understand," he said sharply. "After wounding and disabling Mr. Thesiger, the man took to his heels and ran, throwing away the pistol as he did so. What I cannot understand is why no one pursued him. It wasn't until we heard Mr. Thesiger's story that we knew there was anyone to pursue," remarked Superintendent Battle dryly. "You didn't catch sight of him making off as you turned the corner of the terrace?" "No, I missed him by just about 40 seconds, I should say. There's no moon, and he'd be invisible as soon as he'd left the terrace. He must have leapt for it as soon as he'd fired the shot." Said Sir Oswald. "I still think that a search should have been organized. Someone else should have been posted. There are 3 of my men in the grounds," said the superintendent quietly. "Oh." Sir Oswald seemed rather taken aback. "They were to hold and detain anyone attempting to leave the grounds. And yet they haven't done so. Agreed Battle gravely. Sir Oswald looked at him as though something in the words puzzled him. He said sharply, "Are you telling me all that you know, Superintendent Battle?" "All that I know, yes, Sir Oswald. What I think is a different matter. Maybe I think some rather curious things, but until thinking's got you somewhere, it's no use talking about it. And yet," said Sir Oswald slowly, "I should like to know what you think, Superintendent Battle. For one thing, sir, I think there's a lot too much ivy about this place. Excuse me, sir, you've got a bit on your coat. Yes, a great deal too much ivy. It complicates things." Sir Oswald stared at him, but any reply he might have contemplated making was arrested by the entrance of Rupert Bateman. "Oh, there you are, Sir Oswald. I'm so glad. Lady Coote has just discovered that you were missing, and she has been insisting upon it, that you had been murdered by the thieves. I really think, Sir Oswald, that you had better come to her at once. She is terribly upset." "Maria is an incredibly foolish woman," said Sir Oswald. "Why should I be murdered? I'll come with you, Bateman." He left the room with his secretary. "Oh, there you are, Sir Oswald. I'm so glad. Lady Coote has just discovered that you were missing, and she has been insisting upon it, that you had been murdered by the thieves. I really think, Sir Oswald, that you had better come to her at once. She is terribly upset." "Maria is an incredibly foolish woman," said Sir Oswald. "Why should I be murdered? I'll come with you, Bateman." He left the room with his secretary. "That's a very efficient young man," said Battle, looking after them. "What's his name, Bateman?" Jimmy nodded. "Bateman, Rupert," he said, "commonly known as Pongo. I was at school with him. Were you? Now, that's interesting, Mr. Thesiger. What was your opinion of him in those days?" "Oh, he was always the same sort of ass." "I shouldn't have thought," said Battle mildly, "that he was an ass." "Oh, you know what I mean. Of course, he wasn't really an ass. Tons of brains and always swatting at things, but deadly serious. No sense of humor." "Ah," said Superintendent Battle. "That's a pity. Gentlemen who have no sense of humor get to taking themselves too seriously, and that leads to mischief." "I can't imagine Pongo getting into mischief," said Jimmy. "He's done extremely well for himself so far. Dug himself in with old Coote, and looks like being a permanency in the job." "Superintendent Battle," said Bundle. "Yes, Lady Eileen?" "Don't you think it very odd that Sir Oswald didn't say what he was doing wandering about in the garden in the middle of the night?" "Ah," said Battle, "Sir Oswald's a great man, and a great man always knows better than to explain unless an explanation is demanded. To rush into explanations and excuses is always a sign of weakness. Sir Oswald knows that as well as I do. He's not going to come in explaining and apologizing. Not he. He just stalks in and hauls me over the coals. He's a big man, Sir Oswald." Such a warm admiration sounded in the superintendent's tones that Bundle pursued the subject no further. "And now," said Superintendent Battle, looking round with a slight twinkle in his eye, "now that we're together and friendly-like, I should like to hear just how Miss Wade happened to arrive on the scene so pat." "She ought to be ashamed of herself," said Jimmy, "hoodwinking us all as she did." "Why should I be kept out of it all?" cried Lorraine passionately. "I never meant to be. No, not the very first day in your rooms when you both explained how the best thing for me to do was to stay quietly at home and keep out of danger. I didn't say anything, but I made up my mind then." "I half suspected it," said Bundle. "You were so surprisingly meek about it. I might have known you were up to something." "I thought you were remarkably sensible," said Jimmy Thesiger. "You would, Jimmy dear," said Lorraine. "It was easy enough to deceive you." "Thank you for these kind words," said Jimmy. "Go on and don't mind me. When you rang up and said there might be danger, I was more determined than ever. went on Lorraine. I went to Harrod's and I bought a pistol. Here it is. She produced the dainty weapon, and Superintendent Battle took it from her and examined it. Quite a deadly little toy, Miss Wade, he said. Have you had much practice with it? None at all, said Lorraine. But I thought if I took it with me, well, that it would give me a comforting feeling. Quite so, said Battle gravely. My idea was to come over here and see what was going on. I left the car on the road and climbed through the hedge and came up to the terrace. I was just looking about me when, plop, something fell right at my feet. I picked it up and then looked to see where it could have come from. And then I saw the man climbing down the ivy and I ran. Just so, said Battle. Now, Miss Wade, can you describe that man at all? The girl shook her head. It was too dark to see much. I think he was a big man, but that's about all. And now you, Mr. Thesiger. Battle turned to him. You struggled with a man. Can you tell me anything about him? He was a pretty hefty individual. That's all I can say. He gave a few hoarse whispers. That's when I had him by the throat. He said, "Let me go, governor," something like that. An uneducated man, then? Yes, I suppose he was. He spoke like one. I still don't quite understand about the packet, said Lorraine. Why should he throw it down as he did? Was it because it hampered him climbing? No, said Battle. I've got an entirely different theory about that. That packet, Miss Wade, was deliberately thrown down to you, or so I believe. To me? Shall we say, to the person the thief thought you were. This is getting very involved, said Jimmy. Mr. Thesiger, when you came into this room, did you switch on the light at all? Yes, and there was no one in the room. No one at all. But previously you thought you heard someone moving about down here. Yes, and then, after trying the window, you switched off the light again and locked the door. Jimmy nodded. Superintendent Battle looked slowly round him. His glance was arrested by a big screen of Spanish leather, which stood near one of the bookcases. Brusquely he strode across the room and looked behind it. He uttered a sharp ejaculation, which brought the three young people quickly to his side. Huddled on the floor, in a dead faint, lay the Countess Radsky. The Countess's return to consciousness was very different from that of Jimmy Thesiger. It was more prolonged and infinitely more artistic. Artistic was Bundle's word. She had been zealous in her ministrations, largely consisting of the application of cold water, and the Countess had instantly responded, passing a white, bewildered hand across her brow and murmuring faintly. It was at this point that Bill, at last relieved from his duties with telephone and doctors, had come bustling into the room and had instantly proceeded to make, in Bundle's opinion, a most regrettable idiot of himself. He had hung over the Countess with a concerned and anxious face and had addressed a series of singularly idiotic remarks to her. I say, Countess, it's all right. It's really all right. Don't try to talk. It's bad for you. Just lie still. You'll be all right in a minute. It'll all come back to you. Don't say anything till you're quite all right. Take your time. Just lie still and close your eyes. You'll remember everything in a minute. Have another sip of water. Have some brandy. That's the stuff. Don't you think, Bundle, that's some brandy? For God's sake, Bill, leave her alone, said Bundle crossly. She'll be all right. And with an expert hand, she flipped a good deal of cold water onto the exquisite makeup of the Countess's face. The Countess flinched and sat up. She looked considerably more wide awake. Ah, she murmured. I am here. Yes, I am here. Take your time, said Bill. Don't talk till you feel quite all right again. The Countess drew the folds of a very transparent negligee closer around her. It is coming back to me, she murmured. Yes, it is coming back. She looked at the little crowd grouped around her. Perhaps something in the attentive faces struck her as unsympathetic. In any case, she smiled deliberately up at the one face, which clearly displayed a very opposite emotion. Ah, my big Englishman, she said very softly. Do not distress yourself. All is well with me. Oh, I say, but are you sure? Demanded Bill anxiously. Quite sure. She smiled at him reassuringly. We Hungarians, we have nerves of steel. A look of intense relief passed over Bill's face. A fatuous look settled down there instead, a look which made Bundle earnestly long to kick him. Have some water, she said coldly. Countess refused water. Jimmy, kindlier to beauty in distress, suggested a cocktail. The Countess reacted favorably to this suggestion. When she had swallowed it, she looked round once more, this time with a livelier eye. Tell me, what has happened? She demanded briskly. We were hoping you might be able to tell us that, said Superintendent Battle. The Countess looked at him sharply. She seemed to become aware of the big, quiet man for the first time. I went to your room, said Bundle. The bed hadn't been slept in, and you weren't there. She paused, looking accusingly at the Countess. The latter closed her eyes and nodded her head slowly. Yes, I remember it all now. Oh, it was horrible. She shuddered. Do you want me to tell you? Superintendent Battle said, if you please, at the same moment that Bill said, not if you don't feel up to it. The Countess looked from one to the other, but the quiet, masterful eye of Superintendent Battle won the game. I could not sleep, began the Countess. The house, it oppressed me. I was all, as you say, on wires, the cat on the hot bricks. I knew that in the state I was in, it was useless to think of going to bed. I walked about my room. I read, but the books placed there did not interest me greatly. I thought I would come down here and find something more absorbing. Very natural, said Bill. Very often done, I believe, said Battle. So as soon as the idea occurred to me, I left my room and came down. The house was very still. Excuse me, interrupted the superintendent, but can you give me an idea of the time when this occurred? I never know the time, said the Countess superbly, and swept on with her story. The house was very quiet. One could even hear the little mouse run, if there had been one. I come down the stairs, very quietly. Naturally, I do not want to disturb the household, said the Countess reproachfully. I come in here. I go into this corner, and I search the shelves for a suitable book, having, of course, switched on the light. No, I did not switch on a light. I had, you see, my little electric torch with me. With that, I scanned the shelves. Ah, said the superintendent. Suddenly, continued the Countess dramatically, I hear something, a stealthy sound, a muffled footstep. I switch out my torch and listen. The footsteps draw nearer. Stealthy, horrible footsteps. I shrink behind the screen. In another minute the door opens and the light is switched on. The burglar is in the room. Yes, but I say, began Mr. Thesiger. A large-sized foot pressed his, and realizing that Superintendent Battle was giving him a hint, Jimmy shut up. I nearly died of fear, continued the Countess. I try not to breathe. The man waited for a minute, listening. Then, still with that horrible, stealthy tread, again Jimmy opened his mouth in protest, and again shut it. He crossed to the window and peered out. He remained there for a minute or two. Then he recrossed the room and turned out the lights again, locking the door. I'm terrified. He is in the room, moving stealthily about in the dark. Ah, it is horrible. Suppose he should come upon me in the dark. In another minute, I hear him again by the window. Then silence. I hope that perhaps he may have gone out that way. As the minutes pass, and I hear no further sound, I'm almost sure that he has done so. Indeed, I am in the very act of switching on my torch and investigating when, prestissimo, it all begins. Yes. But it was terrible. Never shall I forget it. Two men trying to murder each other. Oh, it was horrible. They reeled about the room, and furniture crashed in every direction. I thought, too, that I heard a woman scream, but that was not in the room. It was outside somewhere. The criminal had a hoarse voice. He croaked rather than spoke. He kept saying, "Let me go, let me go." The other man was a gentleman. He had a cultured English voice. Jimmy looked gratified. He swore. Mostly, continued the Countess. Clearly a gentleman, said Superintendent Battle. And then, continued the Countess, a flash and a shot. The bullet hit the bookcase beside me. I suppose I must have fainted. She looked up at Bill. He took her hand and patted it. You poor dear, he said. How rotten for you. Silly idiot, thought Bundle. Superintendent Battle had moved on swift, noiseless feet over to the bookcase a little to the right of the screen. He bent down, searching. Presently he stooped and picked something up. It wasn't a bullet, Countess, he said. It's the shell of the cartridge. Where were you standing when you fired, Mr. Thesiger? Jimmy took up a position by the window, as nearly as I can see about here. Superintendent Battle placed himself in the same spot. That's right, he agreed. The empty shell would throw right rear. It's a 455. I don't wonder the Countess thought it was a bullet in the dark. It hit the bookcase about a foot from her. The bullet itself grazed the window frame, and we'll find it outside tomorrow, unless your assailant happens to be carrying it about in him. Jimmy shook his head regretfully. Leopold, I fear, did not cover himself with glory, he remarked sadly. The Countess was looking at him with most flattering attention. Your arm, she exclaimed. It is all tied up. Was it you then? Jimmy made her a mock bow. I'm so glad I've got a cultured, English voice, he said, and I can assure you that I wouldn't have dreamed of using the language I did if I had had any suspicion that a lady was present. I did not understand all of it, the Countess hastened to explain. Although I had an English governess when I was young, it wasn't the sort of thing she'd be likely to teach you, agreed Jimmy. Kept you busy with your uncle's pen and the umbrella of the gardener's niece. I know the sort of stuff. But what has happened? Asked the Countess. That is what I want to know. I demand to know what has happened. There was a moment's silence whilst everybody looked at Superintendent Battle. It's very simple, said Battle mildly. Attempted robbery. Some political papers stolen from Sir Stanley Digby. The thieves nearly got away with them, but thanks to this young lady, he indicated Lorraine, they didn't. The Countess flashed a glance at the girl. Rather an odd glance. Indeed, she said coldly. A very fortunate coincidence that she happened to be there, said Superintendent Battle, smiling. The Countess gave a little sigh and half closed her eyes again. It is absurd, but I still feel extremely faint, she murmured. Of course you do, cried Bill. Let me help you up to your room. Bundle will come with you. It is very kind of Lady Eileen, said the Countess, but I should prefer to be alone. I am really quite all right. Perhaps you will just help me up the stairs. She rose to her feet, accepted Bill's arm, and, leaning heavily on it, went out of the room. Bundle followed as far as the hall, but the Countess reiterating her assurance, with some tartness, that she was quite all right, she did not accompany them upstairs. But as she stood watching the Countess's graceful form, supported by Bill, slowly mounting the stairway, she stiffened suddenly to acute attention. The Countess's negligee, as previously mentioned, was thin, a mere veil of orange chiffon. Through it, Bundle saw distinctly below the right shoulder blade a small black mole. With a gasp, Bundle swung impetuously round to where Superintendent Battle was just emerging from the library. Jimmy and Lorraine had preceded him. There, said Battle. I've fastened the window, and there will be a man on duty outside. And I'll lock this door and take the key. In the morning we'll do what the French call reconstruct the crime. Yes, Lady Eileen, what is it? Superintendent Battle, I must speak to you at once. George Lomax suddenly appeared, Cartwright by his side. Ah, there you are, Battle. You'll be relieved to hear that there's nothing seriously wrong with O'Rourke. I never thought there would be much wrong with Mr. O'Rourke, said Battle. He's had a strong hypodermic administered to him, said the doctor. He'll wake perfectly all right in the morning. Perhaps a bit of a head, perhaps not. Now then, young man, let's look at this bullet wound of yours. Come on. Nurse, said Jimmy to Lorraine, come and hold the basin or my hand. Witness a strong man's agony. You know the stunt. Jimmy, Lorraine, and the doctor went off together. Bundle continued to throw agonized glances in the direction of Superintendent Battle, who had been buttonholed by George. The superintendent waited patiently till a pause occurred in George's loquacity. He then swiftly took advantage of it. I wonder, sir, if I might have a word privately with Sir Stanley? In the little study at the end there. Certainly, said George. Certainly. I'll go and fetch him at once. He hurried off upstairs again. Battle drew Bundle swiftly into the drawing room and shut the door. Now, Lady Eileen, what is it? I'll tell you as quickly as I can, but it's rather long and complicated. As concisely as she could, Bundle related her introduction to the Seven Dials Club and her subsequent adventures there. When she had finished, Superintendent Battle drew a long breath. For once, his facial woodenness was laid aside. Remarkable, he said. Remarkable. I wouldn't have believed it possible. Even for you, Lady Eileen. I ought to have known better. But you did give me a hint, Superintendent Battle. You told me to ask Bill Eversley. It's dangerous to give people like you a hint, Lady Eileen. I never dreamt of you going to the lengths you have. Well, it's all right, Superintendent Battle. My death doesn't lie at your door. Not yet. It doesn't, said Battle grimly. He stood as though in thought, turning things over in his mind. What Mr. Thesiger was about, letting you run into danger like that. I can't think, he said presently. He didn't know till afterwards, said Bundle. I'm not a complete mug, Superintendent Battle. And, anyway, he's got his hands full looking after Miss Wade. Is that so? Said the superintendent. He twinkled a little. I shall have to detail Mr. Eversley to look after you, Lady Eileen. Bill, said Bundle contemptuously. But, Superintendent Battle, you haven't heard the end of my story. The woman I saw there, Anna, no. Yes, no. One is the Countess Radsky. And rapidly, she went on to describe her recognition of the mole. To her surprise, the superintendent hemmed and hawed. A mole isn't much to go upon, Lady Eileen. Two women might have an identical mole very easily. You must remember that the Countess Radziwiłł is a very well-known figure in Hungary. Then this isn't the real Countess Radziwiłł. I tell you, I'm sure this is the same woman I saw there. And look at her tonight, the way we found her. I don't believe she ever fainted at all. Oh, I shouldn't say that, Lady Eileen. That empty shell striking the bookcase beside her might have frightened any woman half out of her wits. But what was she doing there anyway? One doesn't come down to look for a book with an electric torch. Battle scratched his cheek. He seemed unwilling to speak. He began to pace up and down the room, as though making up his mind. At last, he turned to the girl. See here, Lady Eileen, I'm going to trust you. The Countess's conduct is suspicious. I know that as well as you do. It's very suspicious, but we've got to go carefully. There mustn't be any unpleasantness with the embassies. One has got to be sure. I see. If you were sure, there's something else. During the war, Lady Eileen, there was a great outcry about German spies being left at large. Busybodies wrote letters to the papers about it. We paid no attention. Hard words didn't hurt us. The small fry were left alone. Why? Because through them, sooner or later, we got the big fellow, the man at the top. You mean? Don't bother about what I mean, Lady Eileen. But remember this, I know all about the Countess, and I want her let alone. And now, added Superintendent Battle ruefully, I got to think of something to say to Sir Stanley Digby. And so, the mystery draws nearer to its conclusion. The shadows around the 7 dials are beginning to lift, but danger still lingers in the air. The truth is closer than ever, yet a few secrets remain untold. Stay tuned for the final part, where everything will finally be revealed. If you're enjoying the journey, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The end is near, and it just might surprise you.